Hello, everybody. Good morning. It's 10 o'clock-ish, 10 o'clock rock and roll time. Thank you all for coming out first thing. I know it's not crack of dawn early in the morning, but for music conference, like I said, extra CLE for anyone who made it here. My name is Judy Tint. I'm from New York. I come to Nashville quite a bit, and I have the honor of bringing my fabulous, esteemed colleagues here to talk about artist and songwriter income streams in Brother, Can You Spare a Dime? And of course, to be inclusive, brother, sister, anyone, person, can you spare a dime? Couple of quick questions before we get into it. Just curious, how many of you are attorneys here? Okay, quite a few. Law students? Any law students? Okay, my condolences. Thank you for being here. Artists, songwriters, okay, quite a few. And just so you know, when we were putting this together, I love doing CLE panels that are open to non-lawyers as well, because obviously it's important for the practitioners to understand, but I really believe that the artists, the people who have to live these lives, it's good for you to understand what's happening as well. So thank you all for coming. For those of you who are attorneys, just remember that there is a sign-in sheet outside where you can sign up and make sure you put your bar number so you can get your continuing. For those of you who aren't lawyers, we all have to get a certain number of credits every couple of years to make sure we stay current. So if you want your CLE credit, sign in outside. There's a little handbook that they will very generously give you. And to get the supporting materials for this and the various other panels, there's a handy-dandy QR code, which you can scan, and that will take you to more information than you could possibly want or need about all of these topics. So rather than read everybody's canned bios, which can be a little dry and boring, I figured it would be more fun to have these wonderful people introduce themselves. They're all people that I've gotten to know over the years, professionally, personally. They're brilliant at their respective jobs, and they're also wonderful people and friends. And let's start over here. Sophia Sofferman, tell us about yourself.
Thank you, Judy. My name is Sophia Silferman. I work at a law firm called Pryor Cashman. It's a mid-sized firm in New York, LA, and Miami, and I'm based out of the Miami office. I got my start working really in production and rock and roll. I toured with Joe Walsh of the Eagles as the production coordinator, worked on various like reality TV shows and productions, NBA All-Star Game, just learning the industry, going to every venue, touring on a tour bus. From there, shifted, worked in private practice in New York City at a law firm spearheading their entertainment division. Got my master's in law and entertainment law, have worked at Bad Bunny's record label called Remus Entertainment. I was in-house counsel there, and now I've been at Pryor Cashman, and my practice is half and half transactional and litigation. So I work on a bunch of contracts, but then I also handle a bunch of litigation matters inherently related to the music industry, such as copyright infringement.
She does wonderful work, and we got to know each other in the last couple of years. And Pryor Cashman was actually my first job out of law school, so she's adopted. She's mini-me, so very, very proud of her. So Matt Wilson.
Hey, everybody. If you were at the ticketing panel yesterday, forgive the redundancy, but my name is Matt Wilson. I'm a partner at a law firm in Atlanta, Georgia called Arnold Golden and Gregory. Transactional lawyer, deal with contracts almost exclusively. I'm the chair of our firm's entertainment and sports team. My clients range from, in the music space, everyone from artists, venues, live events, indie labels, publishing companies, and such. I'm morally and contractually obligated to also say that I'm a founder and board member of an organization called Backline. We offer mental health resources to anyone in the music industry, their family, friends. So, if you have folks that may need our services, backline.care, look us up. Thanks for having me, Judy.
Great organization. And Justine.
Morning, everyone. I'm Justine Avila, actually a unicorn, grew up here, but got my start as Judy Tint's student in her concert management class, yeah, more or less, through a terrible concert at a taxidermy bar in New York City. And that's the example that I think she
Epic. It
uses
was
to this
epic.
day. But moved back to town and work in management now. I was lucky enough to work at Shopkeeper Management, and now I'm over at Q Prime.
It's true, Justine. One of the things I do, I'll tell you a little bit about me. As I said, I'm Judy Tent. I'm a transactional entertainment lawyer specializing in music in New York City. Born and bred in New York City. I still have my law practice, but I'm also a professor not in the law school at NYU, but in the music business program, teaching undergrad and graduate students about the joys and travails of the music business. First and foremost, I'm a musician. I still get out and play every chance I get. I sing, I play percussion. One of my great claim to fame, I've represented the Motown legends, the Four Tops, for many years, and I frequently go on the road with them, which I describe as the ultimate attorney-client privilege. And big thrill for me. Matt and I have both served in the leadership of the ABA Forum on the entertainment and sports industry. Sophia's about to get much more involved. And for those of you who do work in entertainment, I encourage you to join the forum. It's, or as I call it, 2,000 entertainment lawyers walk into a bar. And it's a great organization, great networking. What ties the various aspects of my career together is just my passionate belief in the power of music to make the world better in lots of different ways. Justine is correct. One of the courses I teach at NYU is called Concert Management. It's about the live business, and I task the students with finding an act, finding a venue, putting on a show. And I would say that the show that they put on was, in my many years at NYU, arguably the worst concert experience, but it made for the best in-class presentation. It could have been filmed for a Netflix special. It was absolutely classic. And look at her now. All of these people are incredibly modest about their accomplishments. They're total badasses, and very happy to be here and very happy that you're here. So just to kind of give you the lay of the land here, as some of the lawyers and perhaps some of the artists and songwriters know, when we talk about the rights and income streams for musicians, there's a lot of different ways, especially these days, where money is generated. But when we talk about recorded music, there are copyrights and income streams in the musical composition and copyrights and income streams in the master recording itself, which is a distinction that sometimes gets a little blurred. I often tell my students that it's like, think of two railroad tracks, right? They're sort of traveling together, but they're not the same. Now, those rights might be owned and controlled by the same people, but not necessarily. Someone might write the song, someone else owns the master recording, and it can get a little convoluted, especially these days when technology has evolved the way it has, because songs are over here, master recordings are over here, and especially in certain genres of music, sometimes it's hard to tell the difference between arranging and producing and composing. So we as lawyers have our work cut out for us. So just to kind of give you what we're planning to do, Sophia's going to talk to us momentarily about some of the key issues for songwriting and music publishing. Matt's going to tackle the master and record deal and streaming side. Some artists are songwriters, some are not. Some songwriters are artists, some are not. And then Justine, who has extensive experience, not just presenting shows in taxidermy bars in Brooklyn, but also as a very high-level manager, is going to dive into touring and merch and sponsorships and some of the other ways that artists and songwriters make money. So hopefully we'll cover plenty of ground. We are going to have some time for Q&A at the end. So we'll try and keep things moving and take it from there. So Sophia, take it away.
All right, great. So anyone that's had any type of contribution to the underlying song, I guess we could even use Bad Girls because Bruce Sadowski's not here today, and a little homage to him, one of the writers on Bad Girls, performed by Donna Summers, right? So anyone that's contributed to the song, the lyrics, the melody, they get a part of that composition, the underlying musical composition. And then there's the songwriter's share, and there's the music publisher's share. And so in those royalties, you have the mechanical royalties, and that's when the song is digitally reproduced. And every time the song is digitally reproduced, then you can get your royalties. And it's the same with performing rights organizations. So if you're a songwriter, you should be, unless you have a publisher, you should be signing up with the Mechanical Licensing Collective, and you should also be signing up with the Performing Rights Organization, ASCAP, BMI, CSAC. So then if you have a publisher, I'll take you through some of the different deal types and structures of those publishing deals, and which might seem a little rudimentary to the lawyers that we do this on a day-to-day. But there are several different types of deals. There's the traditional full publishing deal, right? And that's when a songwriter assigns their copyright in exchange for revenue share. So they'll assign over, when there's a songwriter's share, we're talking about the songwriter's share and the publisher's share, they're assigning out 100% of that publisher share. So it's actually 50%. They're full 50% of the publisher's share. That's usually for the entire life of the copyright. There's usually a pretty good advance there, and the territory can be worldwide. When you hear the term co-publisher, a co-publishing agreement, that's really where the songwriter and the music publisher own 50-50. So it's a 50-50 percentage. However, the music publisher will administer 100% of the share, which means that they're able to control 100% of the share. And that territory is usually, I would call it like domestic plus. It's the United States and Europe, Canada, the UK, as the attorneys on the songwriter's side, like we'll negotiate the territories and what's carved out, what's accepted and whatnot. So that's a definite, if the term can also be for an amount of songs, if it's a pure songwriter, if it's a songwriter and a recording artist, it can be, right, like an album, like 1+2. And then there's different options and advances that are based on the options. Then we get down to the administration agreement, and that's really for DIY artists and established artists, legacy artists. And so that's where there's no ownership share. The administrator, different than the music, like the full music publishing, co-music publishing deal where you're really getting your songs exploited. They're going out there. They're like your publicist for your songs, pitching it to writers and whatnot, finding placements for your songs in movies. And that's called, it's the synchronization income, which is usually a flat fee. So different from that, the administrator usually just registers the copyrights, negotiates the licenses. It's a shorter term. It's about 3 to 5 years. And then, there's sometimes a retention period attached to it, which I would just look at a retention period as like a shorter, like another term. That's how I would kind of view that period. And then, you've got your single song agreements. Like, so say, take Bad Girls, for example. Say there's an administrator or publisher that just wants to use that song and generate and exploit that song, collect the income on that, then they'll make a deal for that song. And that's usually for, a big song, legacy artists and whatnot. So that's kind of the overview of the different types of deals and deal structures in music publishing.
So I'm glad that Sophia mentioned Bruce. As you may have seen in the app, Bruce Sedana was supposed to be here today. He is the co-writer as well as the widower of the late, great Donna Summer. Bruce is also a brilliant singer-songwriter in his own right. He splits his time between Los Angeles and Italy. He was supposed to be with us today. He was supposed to be playing the Bluebird Cafe tonight. I was even going to sing background and play percussion. We were all very excited. Unfortunately, Bruce suffers from a rare sort of neurological condition where the muscles above his eye every once in a while flare up in what's apparently a very painful way. I'm not talking out of school. He put a whole announcement about it on his social media. So we really miss him. We're sorry he's not with us. Bruce, feel better. He is still in Italy. His tour was canceled. But a little bit later on, perhaps if we have time, I'll share the stories that he would have shared because he's got a few of them. I wanted to just pick up on one thing that Sophia said. She mentioned synchronization licenses. And as Matt, I'm sure, is going to talk about, the income that artists typically might have gotten 20, 30 years ago from record sales, it's no secret that income from records has decreased radically as technology has changed. But sync placements or synchronization placements, the use of music in films, in television commercials, in video games, and various other ways that music is synchronized with audio has become a much more lucrative part. If you look at sort of the pie chart of how artists earn money, so very few artists these days are getting rich off their record sales, and even streaming, although the numbers have gotten somewhat better, it's not nearly what it used to be. But you can get a song licensed in a feature film, and keep in mind, as we, those railroad tracks, there's the musical composition and the master recording. So there needs to be a license for the musical composition and for the master recording as well. But that's a very active part of how people are earning money. So for those of you that are representing clients trying to spare a dime, as it were, a really big part of how people are paying their bills.
Judy, I was going to jump in because you guys mentioned the fee and putting a manager hat on. Even if the fee is small, if that show takes off or that movie takes off, then chances are ticket sales take off, or the catalog. So the other compositions that the artist has out, the consumption starts to rise. So you see that long tail, and the revenue from that long tail actually shoot up. So even if, that fee is smaller, you got to look at the overall picture.
That's a great point.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I mean, I've seen rates for films, it could be between 20 to 50,000, and then commercials could be 700,000 to $1 million, depending. And what we'll see on the lawyer side is it'll say per side. It won't say the composition and the master. It'll be like 500,000 per one side, 500,000 for the other side, because of course you need the copyright if you're going to actually play the master as well, for the license of that. So yeah, I mean, that's a great income structure and way to, advise your client is like, once one portion increases, and then kind of your song could just be taking off again and be totally revitalized.
Right. Think about, was it Bjork, Running Up That Hill?
Stranger Things.
Right. So here was a record that had been a hit, 25 years ago, something? Yeah. Maybe not that people have forgotten about it, but certainly wasn't sort of in the public consciousness. There was a sync placement in Stranger Things. All of a sudden, it's the #1 record. So, or think about Tracy Chapman's Fast Car when Luke Combs re-recorded. I mean, it was always a great record, and Tracy Chapman's version was amazing, but apparently this was a favorite song of Luke Combs. He re-recorded it, and I'm sure many of you saw the moment on the Grammys. I get chills just even thinking about it, because when the people in the room realized that she was standing there next to him, it was just this amazing moment, and now that song is everywhere again. So songs, there was a famous rock artist that once says, publishing is like old luggage. It's forever. And, I mean, in Nashville, they always say it all begins with a song, but it really, really does. So
Can I add one more point? Again, just putting on a manager hat for clients. For the long term, we talk about publishing money as your mailbox money. So eventually you're going to want to stop touring. You're going to want to slow down a little bit, but you still want that income. So you still get paid on the composition side, and that's your retirement.
Right. So, Matt, let's talk about records.
Yeah, and I'll make one other point on that. There's an entire panel here, I think it's today, maybe it's tomorrow, on Yellowstone, the television program. And the music supervisors there have been very active in seeking out sort of unknown artists. Not just so, but to Justine's point, you can really start a career in a nice way with a show that has viewership like Yellowstone. I'm going to talk about master recordings a bit, record deals. I'm not going to get into the details, terms as much, but if anyone has a question about specific terms in a record deal, feel free to chime in. So generally, in the old days, before my time, record deals were kind of a one size fits all. All the power and leverage was on the recording label side of things. I think in the last 20 years, certainly the last 10, that power has shifted tremendously to the artist side. Not just because of technology, but just because of the nature of the market. What happened with Napster obviously changed the model quite a bit. So now there's all kinds of options for artists. You have the traditional record deals that still exist with the majors and the indies. There are administration licensing deals, which are somewhat similar to what Sophia was talking about on the publishing angle. There's distribution deals. Even the majors we were talking about before this panel, each of the major record labels have their own distributors, and now they're offering distribution deals or through their distributors, whereas in the old days they refused to acknowledge that was even a possibility or a desire. And then there's small digital labels that just do digital distribution. There's label services companies. You may be familiar with 30 Tigers. They're kind of a hybrid. So there's all kinds of options. You can release your record yourself on CD Baby or DistroKid. Build your own team, pay a flat fee basically for the services, and go out and hire a publicist and a radio promotions person and do it all yourself. So there's just so many options. And so with that being known and said, when an artist comes to me and they want to sign I want a record deal, my first question is, why do you want a record deal? What do you want out of it? What is your model? Are you a touring artist? Are you a recording artist? Are you do you see yourself as a score writer? I mean, there's lots of different models now for artists, and depending upon what that answer is, kind of shuffle them into the right space. If you're a touring artist, you're not going to sell a lot of records. You're not going to have a lot of streaming. Don't go sign a deal and give your copyrights away on the master side forever. Find something that is, short term, or negotiate a deal that has reversion rights in it. For those that don't know what that means, if you do a traditional record deal or even any sort of deal where you're assigning your copyrights over, or a work for hire, which is not technically correct, but nonetheless, you can get reversion rights to those copyrights after 5, 10, 15 years. Sometimes you can negotiate a payout if you haven't recouped by that time. So
Let me interrupt for a second. Just for those who don't know, do you want to sort of explain the concept of recoupment and what that
sure.
entails?
Of course. So if you don't know, and if you do, then I'm being too simplistic. My apologies. So when you sign a deal, whether it's with a traditional label, whether it's with a distribution company, you'll usually get some sort of money, whether they're paying for your recording and your producers, giving you a marketing budget, tour support, all the different kind of bells and whistles that are a benefit to signing a deal. Obviously, is have a bank behind you. Typically, all of those expenses go into a bucket, and the record label or the distributor is going to keep track of every dollar and cent that they spend on marketing, on recording, on producers, et cetera. And the artist has to recoup that money, or the label has to recoup it from the artists, otherwise paid money, the royalties that they would be getting. So that money may never be paid back. I mean, some artists look at their advances and the recording budget as, this is free money. We're never going to see a dollar from our project, and that's okay. We're out on the road. We're selling tickets. We're selling merch. This master recording we released is just an advertisement for us. Some artists recoup and they get mailbox money for a long period of time, but that's far less likely. I mean, physical sales. So I'll go through the list of kind of how master recordings can be used. Obviously, physical sales, vinyl records are crushing. CDs are coming back weirdly, as are tapes in some markets. But physical is what it is. Streaming is the cash cow now. Digital downloads used to be a thing, not so much anymore. There are ad-supported revenue streams. If you put your music on YouTube or other places like TikTok where it can be monetized by users, that's a stream. We talked about sync licensing. When you do a sync, you license the publishing side and you license the sound recording side. And then there's soundtracks, writing for commercials, specific recording activities like that. So anyway, if you have a record deal and it's an exclusive deal, the label's going to have their hands in all those different streams and pots and take their share until they're fully recouped on what they've spent on you.
I just wanted to pick up on one thing that Matt was talking about it with the concept of recoupment. Sort of back in the day, a record deal would be structured either in a fixed period of time. The label might have options to pick up additional periods of time. Sometimes it would be defined by product commitment, an album plus options for additional albums. And of course, the whole way music is distributed has changed. It might not be an album, it might be a single or an EP. But the point about recoupment, unfortunately, for our artist and songwriter clients, that the trend that we've been seeing a lot lately is that the term is not defined so much by this many years or this many products. They add a clause at the end that says, or until all advances have been recouped, whichever is later. Because it used to be a label might advance hundreds of thousands of dollars, the deal would end, the artist's account would be sort of in the hole, in the red, unrecouped, and the artist could be like, okay, thanks, see ya, and then walk across the street and sign a deal with another label. And we could talk all day about who was responsible for the fact that this money was never earned back. Sometimes it's just, it's hard for artists to break through and become successful. But what a lot of labels and music publishers as well are doing now is like, well, we're not going to send you to debtor's prison. You don't have to go out and drive an Uber in order to earn that money to pay us back. But until that money is paid back, you're still subject to the terms of this deal. And then you see these clauses saying, well, if you want to get out, not just you can pay us back the unrecouped balance, but you can pay us back the unrecouped balance like they want a tip on it, plus 10%, plus 20%. I've seen it as high as 35%. So if you're unrecouped to the tune of $100,000, you have to pay them back $135,000 in order to get your get out of jail free card. So
And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, it gets you out of the deal, right? We talk about how the artists now have more power in negotiating these deals. Working that in there is better than being locked into an exclusive recording contract
That's
for the rest of your life. And that's one of the key components to the old record deals, is that they were exclusive. No matter anything you did, whether it was recording as your artist project, whether you were on stage playing at the AMAs and it's being recorded, the labels perhaps they own that recording. If you go out and record with your friend, if you produce a record, any kind of activity typically is gobbled up into that exclusivity arrangement. And you negotiate stuff, side projects and things where you typically the label wants permission to give permission for you to do those kinds of activities, and they want to get a credit if you do go record with somebody else or produce. But these are all things you negotiate in the contracts, and that's why you hire us.
Right. And I think it's a lot easier, back in the day to try and get a side artist clearance, months of negotiation. And all you have to do is listen to music, so-and-so featuring so-and-so. This club, people are featuring on each other's projects all the time. So you still have to clear the legal hurdles, but a smart label will know that it's a good idea, first of all, to give clearance, because tomorrow you're going to be looking to that other label to give clearance to you. But it's also, there's a lot to be said for keeping your artist happy. So if your exclusive artist wants to collaborate with somebody over here, it's a good thing to accommodate them. What were you going to say?
Well, one of the number one things I look at when I first look at an agreement is also, how do I get you out, right? And what Judy had said is like, that is intricately tied to the term, right? The later of recoupment. So if sometimes it can be based on, especially in an admin deal, if the artist has been in the deal for, and he's still within term and he's fully recouped, I want to be able to give the songwriter an option that they can get out. They can just 100% if it's with it during the term, or 105, 110, just it all depends on your clout. Another little intricacy is when there are options, like say, for example, in the first initial term, you're getting an advance of $50,000, but then there's an option for another term, and that's another $50,000, but you can't get that advance until you're recouped, or that the amount that you're unrecouped, if you're currently unrecouped going into that second option, that amount, say you're unrecouped by $20,000, and you're supposed to get a $50,000 advance, then that amount, you're really only getting $30,000, right? And so what I'll do on my end is negotiate what's called a sub floor. And that will be like, okay, well, no matter what, my songwriter will get, $25,000 as a sub floor. So I can go back to them and say, listen, you're unrecouped, but this is the amount that you're gonna get because we had done this in the beginning.
There you go.
And I'd like to hear what Justine prioritizes when you look for a label partner. But I do want to say, we're talking about everything from the artist perspective right now, and I represent some indie labels, so I'd be remiss if I didn't, give them some acknowledgement. But labels do great work, right? That you distribution, tour support, obviously the money side of things, but creative assistants, they're professionals. There's a lot of services that a label can provide that are incomparable, and to the extent your career is directed in a way that would work well with a label partner, you're not gonna do a better job by yourself. I mean, they're pros, and that it's still a good partnership.
Yeah, and I mean, from the publisher's perspective, 100%, because the publishers not only are putting forth an advance, right? They're putting their team, their people are salaried who are working at those companies who are just there to lift up your career. So that's why, there is an acknowledgement of what you called a tip on there as to all the other people that have been, okay, you are the songwriter, you are the artist we're taking on to work on our team and to build you up.
Right. I want to take a sort of brief tangent. When we talk about record deals, some of you may have heard the term 360 deal, right? And that, of course, comes with like the 360 degrees of the circle. And I think and some people call them an all rights deal, not an all right deal, but an all rights deal, right? And when this first came out, I think a lot of people just sort of clutched their pearls, and it's like, oh, this is terrible, because then a label would be sort of putting their hands into all these touring and merch and publishing. And the way I look at it is this: it's one thing if it's just a land grab. If a label is saying, we're going to sign you, and if you're going to sign with us, therefore, we're going to get a piece of your publishing, and a piece of your touring, and a piece of your merch. Thank you very much. And if you don't give us that, you can't sign with our label. That's not what we're looking for, right? On the other hand, you have scenarios, especially with some of the larger companies, where it might be, okay, we want to sign you, but we also want you to talk to, as Sophia was saying, our publishing team, and they're going to help you collaborate with some other writers, and they know some great music supervisors who can help get your songs placed in Grey's Anatomy, right? Used to be in the old days, the idea of having music in a commercial was like, oh, we're selling out. Whereas these days, sometimes records are broken through being placed in commercials. So you have a label saying, we're going to put you with our publishing team. We have a touring division. They're going to help you get some opening act slots. We have a merch division. They're going to help you get a better per item cost for your merch. So it's not just, we're going to take this money because we can, but we are going to help increase your income. And what I always tell people is it's not just about how you divide the pie, it's how you grow the pie. So if it's a 360 deal where the label is really going to help you increase those income streams, then even if you're giving up 25%, the 75% that you're left with might very well be considerably greater than the 100% you would have been without it. So not all 360 deals are the same. So, Justine, you've worked with some amazing, very successful artists. You've been out on the road. Justine also, for a number of years, was the executive director of the Music City Music Council here in Nashville. So she knows a thing or two. So from your perspective as a manager, what are you looking at these days?
Yeah, I mean, Matt, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. It's not a one-size-fits all kind of deal. It depends on what your artist wants. I think philosophically, it changes across the board. For myself, when I like working with artists, my upfront is to try to take the least amount of money possible so that you get a larger share of the back end. And I am thinking of every single time betting on yourself. And that is for retirement, that is for your royalty share, everything like that. And as touring plays into that, A big piece of that is tour support that happens with a label. And you just, alluded to a 360 deal. So is everyone in the room familiar with some of the economics of touring? Yeah. So example, a brand new bus right now costs you about $30,000 a month. And that doesn't include fuel, and that does not include a driver. And that is one bus. So you're looking at that just out the door, right? Not to mention production, not to mention your crew. So usually on the margin side, if you're doing 10 to 15%, you're doing pretty well as your net take home as an artist. But if you're an emerging act, say it costs you around $1,000 to $1,500, and your show guarantees right now are $200. So you've got to lean on your label to get out the door, or you're looking at other revenue streams. So if your music is streaming well and you're independently distributed, great, you're going into your own pocket to help you tour support. So you can pay your band, pay your van, pay fuel, all of those costs. Again, philosophically looking at it, I like to say, take the least amount of money possible. And I'm working with an emerging act right now who is not signed to a label, but he was able to do 15 tour dates because we coupled those with festival dates. So that was a larger payout for him to cover his own headlining shows. And they're in a van, keeping the costs as small as possible so that when the time comes to find a label partner, he has the most leverage going into those deals. And I think, Sophia, you kind of mentioned the leverage. So what we look at those is what kind of artistic freedom do you get, and how can we get out of the deal if it goes sour? And that's really what we look at across the board. But they are partners. They're the first movers. Usually, well, they're the second movers. Usually publishers are the first ones here in Nashville that come in, and they're really involved in the creative process. So you see that tip amount, I call it interest, on that payout because they're the first ones to invest and really get the artist or songwriter in rooms with other folks and start getting their name out and about town. So, as it relates to touring, again, kind of bringing it back full circle, that's one piece of it. The other piece is sponsorships. So you can offset your touring costs with a very small brand. So now you're seeing smaller brands do influencer targeting, right, on social media. Those may be $10,000 to $20,000, but that can make or break a tour for a smaller artist. And you have to do 3 or 4 posts from the road, easy peasy. And that's easy money that helps you get out there. On a larger scale, that can be $500,000 to $1 million, depending on the act. So it can be large sums that help offset those costs. And then merchandise. Again, on a per show, on some of the clients I've seen, it's $5 to $10 per head. But if you're providing your own merch and the label's not taking a piece, you're only looking at cost of goods sold and then the percentages out that you pay to, management, legal, business management as well. So that is a good chunk of change in your pocket. Again, using the emerging act that I work with. One of his recent shows, he had a guarantee of about $1,000, but he did $1,000 in merch. So he was able to offset all of his costs from that show just on merchandise alone.
Well, I guess that's the flip side of why we all roll our eyes at paying $65 for a T-shirt. It's helping keep these people on the road. It makes a difference.
But again, too, the largest part is then when it comes time for the record deal, and Matt, you kind of alluded to this, it becomes a scale question. Okay, you've done all you can at a certain level, so now you need the workforce and the team behind you to help grow that even higher. And it's more than one manager can do, one management team, or like a team of 5. You will need an army of people, and that's what hopefully your label can do for you.
And to that point, as I mentioned, there are different shapes and sizes of the deals. If you are kind of a do-it-yourself artist, you have some money, you can go and record yourself, pay a producer, and then find a distributor that is good at distributing records and hire your own team. Hire Carrie Baker, hire a radio promo person. You can build a team around your project that believes in your music, that knows your fan base, the demographics, where you're going, who you're trying to reach, and be really creative in how you put the ultimate project and distribution together.
Justine, do you want to talk a little bit about some of the sort of ancillary products that artists, and this is for all the panelists actually, you hear, I have a clothing line, I have a hair product line. I don't have a hair product line, but, the different ways that artists are expanding. So what's your experience there?
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of times, those are licensing deals that I've seen, usually because the lift is easier in that sense. You're not starting a business from scratch. You're lending your name and you're lending your creativity to it. I think kind of some more involved artists use what are they called, white label products, and then will lend their name to it. So you'll see that a lot in cosmetic cases, where it looks like the artist brand, but it's actually the same brand as like 5 other makeup brands, but they're sticking their name on it and they get a large share of the revenue. So it can vary across the board. Again, I think it depends on how entrepreneurial your artist is and their team, how involved they want to be. If they just want to put their name on it, call it a day, you can do that as well and grow that. But I think you're seeing a lot more of those deals, especially as artist brands grow. It's easier for them to say, okay, the shirt that I'm wearing is my Wrangler shirt that you can buy online. The same with my hat. Or the same with my boots. You'll see that a lot in the country space. They do Stetson brand deals, Tacova brand deals, all of that, so that they're participating essentially in all of the revenue that they're advertising as an artist. Yeah.
And when we talk about those deals, what you have to keep in mind is that there needs to be a symbiotic relationship, right? And there's a lot of thought that goes into how these partnerships are created. Does this brand want to be associated with this artist? What is this artist doing? Will it reflect well on our company and the values that we as a company are trying to espouse? And vice versa, right? For an artist, for some artists, they might be happy to have an endorsement deal with Budweiser. For another artist who perhaps has a history in their family, their father was an alcoholic, and alcohol is a dirty word to them. They may not want to deal with Budweiser. So these all have to be sort of very carefully thought out so that you sort of think of it as a Venn diagram. Hopefully the artist has their fans over here, the brand has their fans, supporters, customers over here. We hope that there is sort of an overlap, but the hope would be that the brand is going to get new consumers because the artist will bring them in, and the artist might get new fans through the brand itself.
And I was going to say, usually the best relationships you see are the authentic relationships, right? The artist is already using said product before they were super big, before they're famous. It's a part of their family history. Like some country artists are really big on knives. So Case knives are a part of their family. Their grandfather had one that was passed down through the line. You'll see those types of deals that I think really reflect the best and are the most authentic, especially online as you're selling it, versus, hey, I'm drinking this really cool new energy drink. It just feels very inauthentic, and usually the terms are pretty short. It's not a lasting relationship.
Right. I mean, I'm not a big drinker, but if anyone out there knows anyone with like peanut M&Ms, I'll do an endorsement deal anytime. Long-time consumer. I saw a couple of hands. We're almost done, but we will get to some questions at the end, so if you wouldn't mind holding your questions. Justine talked about social media, and I'm just curious for anybody up here how you think that has impacted the kinds of deals that you're making. Obviously, it has changed the world. Maybe for the better, maybe not so much. We don't have to go down the rabbit hole of the ways in which it's made the world angrier, but certainly to be strategic and proactive in how we service our clients. How does that come into play in the approach that you take?
Social media has definitely played a big part, especially like for influencer clients that have a huge following. It adds to their clout, just depending on, some artists are able to break a song on social media, right? So it just all plays a part of their audience engagement, organic fans, and how often they post and their content, but mostly into how organic it is.
And it's all part of the marketing package, right? And I think what I'm seeing more now is the super fan VIP kind of engagement. An artist with a small, very dedicated audience can have a very successful career by creating special merch, by doing special shows, by having VIP experiences at concerts, all by reaching these super fans. And social media is by far and away the most direct way to access that source of fan.
And I'll just kind of add to that. I think social media has its pros and cons. One of the biggest cons is that artists now, especially the younger ones, are online all the time. So they're looking at their numbers and they're constantly having this anxiety about their numbers, because then they'll go look at someone else's numbers and say, oh my gosh, they put out one EP, I put out the same amount of music, and they have 100,000 more monthly listeners than I do. But to that point, Matt, like if those are passive listeners, that's not going to do anything for you. If you have 100,000 less monthly listeners that are true fans that are going to buy merch and go to your shows, you're doing, leaps and bounds ahead of everyone else. And like one of my favorite examples is, there was an artist recently, and I won't use their name, but they have something like 5 million monthly listeners on Spotify. They sold out 2 Bridgestones on that, but you'll see larger acts with 300,000 monthly listeners, and they can't sell out an arena. So it's looking at that diehard fan and making sure those are true fans, especially as that ties into the social media strategy of putting out authentic content that's true to your music and true to you.
Yeah, and just to piggyback off of that, even for performance agreements, if my client has a significant following in their own kind of VIP section that their managers help them get, right, their own experience, I've been able to carve that out of agreements where we're able to sell through the tickets our VIP experience for that artist, and that money goes nearly 100% into our pocket. It's unusual, but it's been done in specific scenarios. Yeah.
That's great. Well, I mentioned earlier that I was going to try and get the great Bruce Sedano into the room. Matt and I were fortunate to work with Bruce on a similar panel at the Folk Alliance conference earlier this year. And Bruce told a story which really stayed with me. As I mentioned, Bruce was married to the great Donna Summer. He's an amazing songwriter, and he co-wrote a number of her songs, and of course is the executor and administrator of her interests since her untimely passing. And evidently, they got a call at some point early this year from Kanye West, who wanted to sample a Donna Summer song. And again, going back to what we talked about earlier, even when you're talking about sampling, there's the musical composition, there's the master recording. So in most cases, if someone is just taking a sample from an actual old recording, you have to get both of those licenses to clear the sample. So Kanye went to Donna's team, asked if they could played a part of the track, asked if they could do the sample, and Bruce, as is absolutely his right, said, no, thank you. Kanye, being Kanye, can you guess where this is going? Used it anyway. So Bruce was not happy. There was a lawsuit, and it was not a pretty situation. By contrast, he shared the story of getting a call one day from Beyonce's team. And Bruce, as I mentioned earlier, splits his time between LA and Italy. He happened to be in Italy at the time, and Beyonce's people called him and said, we want to use a sample from a Donna Summer song in something that Beyonce is putting out. We'd like to come and play it for you. And Bruce said, well, I'm sorry, I'm in Italy. And they said, okay, we'll come there and play it for you. And he said, no, that's okay. It can wait until I get back to Los Angeles. He got back to Los Angeles. The way he tells it, they came to his house. They set up the biggest speakers he had ever seen. They played him this song and could not have been more respectful, deferential. We want you to hear this. How do you feel about it? Is there anything that you would like us to change? In other words, the sort of polar opposite from somebody who feels like, well, technologically I can grab that song, so I'm just going to use it whether you like it or not. And somebody who goes in with the proper level of respect. And it turns out he was very happy with what they did. Are you sure you don't want us to change anything? And they wanted to make sure that Bruce was okay with it, and they wanted to honor Donna's memory and make sure she would have been happy. And I get asked all the time, but well, can I get away? Can I just clear this sample? It's just 3 seconds. It's just 5 words. And I say, well, it's like you can't go into Macy's and say, it was only a small television that I stole, right? It's like appropriation is appropriation, and people don't always understand that intellectual property is property. So I tell people, if you're trying to use somebody else's music, it's not about, well, can I get away with it? Will I get caught? You hope that your track is going to be successful, and sooner or later, if it is, the owners of anything that you've used are going to find out about it. But also, how would you feel if somebody took your intellectual property?
I was just going to add one thing. It's a very relationship-based business. So even on that note, you don't know the layers of people involved. And so by doing that, you've probably ticked off 40 or 50 people that may now say, oh, I never want to work with you again. And that may affect other sides of your business. So keeping that in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we talk about networking all the time, and I'm sure most of you have had this experience. You look at something significant that's happened in your career, and when you think back, oh, it's just because I had coffee with that person 6 years ago, and then their next door neighbor got a record deal, and you're the one that they called. So it's just good business to just be respectful and cordial, return phone calls, return emails, and treat, today's sort of assistant engineer is going to be tomorrow's CEO. So you just always want to be righteous with people. So we did have a couple of questions. I saw, yes. Hi. Our pleasure.
I have merchandise deals that are getting really weird. A major third-party provider of merchandise. Just 2 questions. A, they want to give us a large advance, crazy, great, but they want the same payout once they've recouped at that number. I'm wondering, are you running into where the merch is, on a sliding scale, but once the company has recouped what they gave out, do the numbers change? That's the first one. 2, we had a deal that went south with Amazon. I wondered if you had anything like this where they want your artist to on their Amazon Prime pages, but they want your artist to wear clothing that is all available on Amazon, and the artist, of course, wants couture and won't be.
Yeah, on the Amazon piece, I mean, it's pretty intertwined because then they do the promo on Amazon Music, right? So it behooves you to have the artist store, but I have not run into a situation where they're asking you to wear that merchandise. The other piece of that is it is a sliding scale on the back end, especially when you recoup. I've seen the percentages go down a lot upon recoupment, depending on what that advance number is, and 5 to 10. Yep.
Right. I would just say that the only rule is that there are no rules, and everything is negotiable, and I mean, it's still to a large degree sort of what the market will bear, right? So if you have an artist that is hot and breaking out, you can it's like when Derek Jeter, I am a Yankee fan, what can I say? When Derek Jeter first signed with the Yankees, he got a rookie deal. When he was a 10-time All-Star and 5-time world champion, we are in first place, I might add. So he got a different deal, and it's the same with artists. You can make the kinds of deals once you become very successful that you might not at the early stage. You had a question over here.
It was just related to venues taking cuts of merchandise. I know there was some pushback on that.
I mean, I think you were in our ticketing panel yesterday. We talked about that a lot. But traditionally, venues take a piece because they have someone staffed, they have security, they have arguments why they should. Live Nation recently has implemented policies where they're not doing it as much, which kind of forces the market to follow. I represent a lot of independent venues, and they have to keep the lights on. An artist is getting the bulk of a guarantee. fees aren't popular with anyone, taking a slice of the merch table may be the only revenue stream that's going to, pay the staff and the security and keep the bathrooms clean. So, I mean, I see both sides. Typically, festivals are sticking with their percentages. A lot of venues are foregoing the percentages because Live Nation has that power to push the market that direction.
Okay? Yeah, hi.
In when they're joint copyrights on the music publishing or record side, whether one person can grant the scene merchandise, scene or master use license and also the sampling license. Does that, because I've seen situations where one person grants and they say, we've got a license, it's fine, it's non-exclusive. You see?
I'm sorry, what couldn't
The
you
question was like, if there's a joint copyright, either, in the music publishing or in the master, because it's a little more unusual in the master, it's very common in the music publishing. Can just one of those people grant?
It ultimately depends on the deal. If it's truly a jointly owned work, under the Copyright Act, that means any joint owner can administer. They just have to share the revenue stream that comes from that exploitation. But that's a terrible way to go about administering your copyrights. You want to have a deal in place where somebody's administering it, preferably a pro. And on the master side, as you said, it's not nearly as common, but it does happen. But yeah, joint works can be messy. Because each owner can enter a license agreement, and they may conflict. One may license to Ford and one may license to Chevy. I mean, that's not good. So there's.
But if they do they have to account for the other one?
Yes. You have to account for whatever their share is of that work.
Right. You had a question there.
Five songs and 20 songs, so you get so often that someone gets started and they'll make you try to be cool. First, like 6, 10 songs. So when should somebody like
Before you have
Again.
any team member, you need a lawyer.
I would, it's like the good answer to many of these questions is it depends. So I don't know that there is a one size fits all answer, but I think, I mean, certainly if somebody has a contract that needs to be negotiated, they don't want to sign it. They should not want to sign it without getting proper advice and counsel. And that also means not going to my brother-in-law. My brother-in-law is a lawyer. Well, your brother-in-law might be a real estate lawyer, but doesn't know the first thing about entertainment industry contracts. It's like, if somebody asked me to do a house closing, I wouldn't, you don't go to an open heart surgeon for knee replacement surgery, right? So it's important to have somebody who's qualified. And very often I have people bring me contracts and they say, would you review this contract for me? And I review it and then I get to the last page and it's already signed. It's like, wait, right? And understandably, people in the early stages of their careers don't have unlimited budgets, and admittedly, lawyers cost money, and sometimes people feel that they can't afford it, but what you spend going in is very often a lot less than what it might cost you on the other side.
And I was just going to say, what happens with a lot of young artists that move to town is that they'll start working with a producer and they'll say, hey, you're going to give me X percentage of the back end. This is just kind of how we do stuff here. And they'll sign that without having anyone review it because they just moved to town and they're like, oh, okay, this sounds great. The same with co-writing or anything like that. And then when management and legal gets involved, it's a lot of undoing.
Right. And sometimes lawyers are there to handle a particular agreement. Sometimes lawyers I always tell my clients, I'm here to help you navigate the shark-infested waters of the music business. So it's good to have somebody who is ostensibly impartial, who can advise on all these other deals. But you don't necessarily need to go out and spend a fortune to hire a lawyer when you're sitting in your bedroom and thinking, okay, I think I'm going to write songs. But better a little too soon than a little too late would be my answer. Anyway, unfortunately, we are out of time. I want to acknowledge our friend Room Guy in the back and the great volunteers and staff. Give it up for the Americana volunteers who are doing so much. We'll stick around for a couple of minutes if anyone has any more questions. Thank you all for coming, and we'll see you out there.